I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 19 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Colleagues.
I would like to invite all of us to observe a moment of silence for Gunner Sebastian Amaljian, who passed away a few days ago while on deployment in Latvia as part of Operation Reassurance. I'm sure all of you want me to share on your behalf that our thoughts go out to his family, his friends, and to the entire CAF community and veterans during these very difficult times. So on behalf of all of us here, we wanted to do and start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. In accordance with the motion adopted on September 18, 2025, the committee is meeting in its study on obstacles to entrepreneurship among veterans. Today's meeting will be held in hybrid format in accordance with the standing rules. MPs can participate in person or using the Zoom application.
Ask that all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all our participants, including the interpreters. Un grand merci à vous tous.
Thank you to all of you.
Our code on the card, which links to a short awareness video. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and our members. So I know that our witness is the first time that he's here. So so I would just say to all of us, let's remember that please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And for those participating by video conference, and I don't think, Mr. Clerk, that we have anyone today. So that's, we're not going to be having this issue. But for those who needs interpretation, right in front of you, as you know, always available, the floor English and French for the interpretation channel. Pour les députés présents dans la salle.
For members present in the room, if you wish to take the floor, please raise your hand. Please don't forget.
Wait for myself to recognize you. So, on this, I would like to welcome our witness for this first hour. Unfortunately, our second witness had to withdraw from the panel due to an unexpected obligation, and we will make sure that we'll re-invite the witness that was scheduled today. But we are very happy in having Morrow Consulting and Training, Inc., Mr. David Morrow, Chief Performance Officer, who is here today and joining us en personne. It's a pleasure to welcome you. Mr. Morrow, you have 5 minutes to give your opening remarks. We will then proceed to a series of questions with the members of the committee. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dave Morrow. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, founder of Morrow Consulting and Training, Inc., creator of the Hard to Kill project at hardtokill.org. That includes an internationally awarded podcast, the Hard to Kill podcast, an Amazon best-selling book, Harden the F Up, an online veterans Getting Fit AF community that is the first to offer frontline medical coverage and plant medicine consulting through the AVET protocol, and receive Veterans Affairs Canada funding to improve the health and fitness of our female warriors with our world-class Athena program. I'm also, as far as I know, the only Canadian veteran who has co-organized an international entrepreneur conference at the largest military entrepreneurship conference in the world, the Military Influencer Conference. And I spent the last 6 years talking shop with some of the biggest American and Canadian veteran business leaders. I'll also slip in there that if not for the Hard to Kill podcast and my team, there wouldn't be nearly as many Afghan interpreters and their families here in Canada. So let me start the way any good entrepreneur should, with an offer. My offer is simple. Work with me to map, measure, and unlock the veteran entrepreneurship pipeline in Canada, not in theory, not in another glossy brochure, through a proper evidence-based strategy that treats veterans founders as a national economic asset, not a side project. I'm not going to give you a 10-point solution in 5 minutes, that's obvious. That would be consultant malpractice. What I am going to do is lay out the problem, show you what we know from the United States, and make it painfully clear how little we actually know about veteran entrepreneurs in Canada. If you want real answers, that's what a follow-on mandate is for. In the United States, the picture is very clear. 1.6 million businesses that contribute $1 trillion worth of revenue per year. Research has shown that the American veterans are almost twice as likely to be self-employed as non-veterans, and 80% more successful in their businesses than their civilian counterparts. In other words, the US can actually measure both the upside and the friction in their veteran entrepreneurship ecosystem. Now let's cross the border. In Canada, we know there are about 460,000 veterans and roughly 8,500 members transition out of the Canadian Armed Forces every year. Here's the uncomfortable question. How many of them own businesses? In what sectors? With how many employees? What are their failure rates, their capital gaps, their export potential? No one in this room can answer that question with confidence because we haven't bothered to build a proper national picture. We have signals, though, just not a system. We have grassroots initiatives like shopveteran.ca, programs like Princess Operation Entrepreneur, which is now unfortunately defunct. So that's the first barrier. We're flying blind. My personal experience as an entrepreneur navigating the minefield of VAC and PCVRS programs included being threatened with benefit suspension for not following the vocational plan of becoming a CBC radio host, even though I'm a biochemist with a master's degree in education, having my DEC decision delayed due to the suspicion that since I host a podcast and coach veterans, I was making employment income and not declaring it while on the IRB, and not being eligible for a work chair due to my service-related injury from VAC due to the fact that I'm self-employed. From my work with Canadian veterans and from the largest military entrepreneurship conference in the world, a few themes keep on coming up. Data and visibility. Veteran founders are invisible in our national stats. If you're not counted, you're not planned for. You're not in the procurement strategies, not in the innovation funds, not in the export playbooks. Capital and benefits cliff. In the US, they at least know veterans are more likely to be entrepreneurs and still face financial gaps. In Canada, a veteran weighing a startup has to navigate a maze of VAC benefits, tax rules, and provincial programs. Often with a very real fear that trying to build a business will jeopardize the safety that keeps food on the table. The fact that we prevent income growth while on disability is beyond comprehension to me, and implies we would rather sit at home, collect our check, shut up, and smoke our cannabis. There's fragmented supports. There's no clear front door for Canadian veterans who want to start and grow a business. Instead, there's a patchwork of nonprofits, boot camps, short-term projects, and well-meaning pilots. Good people, good work, but from a systems perspective, it's a bag full of parts, not an engine. And culture and identity. We train people to follow orders in the Canadian Armed Forces, then drop them into a world where success depends on breaking patterns, questioning assumptions, and pitching themselves. For many, especially those dealing with injuries like myself, chronic pain and operational stress injuries, entrepreneurship is both an opportunity and a psychological minefield. Not to mention, back home in Montreal, I'm surrounded by a friend network of veteran entrepreneurs that never mention that they're veterans because it's bad for business. Why? Canada has consistently driven home a message in the media that we are unhinged, sex predators, or grumpy old man veterans complaining about our benefits. The reality is only veterans buy from other veteran-owned businesses. Not a single increase in sales during my Elbows Up campaign, unfortunately. So what do I want from you today? Not a brochure, not another pilot. I want this committee to treat veteran entrepreneurs as economic policy, not charity. That means three things at a high level. Count us, direct VAC, StatsCan, and partners to properly identify, track, and report on veteran-owned businesses as a distinct category. Follow the outcomes, not the intentions. Tie funding and programs to measurable results. Revenue growth, jobs created, exports, innovation, not just seats in a workshop. and stop assuming job seeker is the only post-service identity available. For a significant portion of veterans, the right question is isn't who will hire you, it's what will you build and how do we get out of your way. That is where my consulting offer comes in. My team and I know this landscape from the ground level, Canadian and American. We built programs, navigated VAC, secured funding as a for-profit company, and worked directly with veterans who are trying to create value instead of just survive. I'm not here to hand you a prepackaged solution. I'm here to say you have a massive, underused engine of economic growth sitting in your veteran community. And right now, you don't even have the dashboard wired up. Give us a mandate to build the dashboard and the roadmap that follows. Do that, and 5 years from now, we won't be guessing how many veteran entrepreneurs Canada has. We'll be arguing how to scale them faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. I would like to open the questions now to Mr. Richards.
Sure, thanks, and thank you for being here. And I especially appreciate, you certainly came here with a very clear set of ideas and recommendations for us, and that's incredibly valuable. So thank you for that. You briefly mentioned the United States, and it sounded to me like you felt like that they are doing a better job in terms of, I guess, fostering and encouraging veteran entrepreneurship. That was kind of what I thought I heard you imply there. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what you know there in terms of the differences between Canada and the United States in regards to that, and what we could learn and what we could apply here in Canada to do better, to help encourage and foster our veteran entrepreneurs? Absolutely.
It's a great question, and I wouldn't be a good senior non-commissioned officer and officer of Canadian Armed Forces if I didn't show up with solutions to a complex problem. So what I've seen in the United States and what I've learned in the United States is because they're able to have a office in their VA, so in their Veterans Affairs Department, that handles new businesses. You can get a designator, which is a number, which allows them to access different types of funding. That alone would be able to get the ball rolling, in my opinion, here in Canada, where you would have then the potential to apply for preferential rates at the bank, maybe BDC. Additionally, be able to bid on contracts where a certain amount of contracts, and that's policy in the United States, have to be veteran-owned companies. I think that alone would create a massive windfall for a lot of Canadian businesses, because veteran-owned businesses, just because we don't have, like I said, we don't have an entry point, we don't have a front door. So their network of veteran businesses is vastly superior to ours. They recognize it in policy, and because of that, they are obviously the kings of entrepreneurship in that regard. And because so many veterans are more adept at creating businesses, because from personal experience, it makes sense, our risk tolerance is way higher, way higher than the average civilian. I mean, what I did in the military compared to what I do now, it's kind of laughable. I sit behind a mic and do podcasts, and I coach people online. So for me, the risk is financial, right? That to me is cakewalk compared to what I did in Canadian Armed Forces. So I think we'd be wise to start looking at how they set up their structure policy-wise, and see if we can emulate it as closely as possible. And the Americans are great when it comes to collaborating and wanting to work with us to help get us off the ground, and that's why I do a lot of my work in the United States.
I could be mistaken, but I believe that this occurs in the U.S. That there is a preferred status for veteran-owned businesses in terms of procurement when it comes to government procurement. Is that something you think would make a big difference for a lot of veteran-owned businesses if we were to apply something like that in Canada, give veterans a preferred status in terms of government procurement?
I think that's a no-brainer solution. I mean, I know one here in Ottawa already that would be first in line, in my opinion. It's not really my wheelhouse. I offer services to individual veterans to improve their health and fitness, but related to procurement, I think that's a no-brainer strategy, just because I think there would be a lot of veterans that would take that as a signal to start creating really good solutions, because especially in the defense industry, we see what the gaps are. So if we leave, just like in the American system, they see where the gaps are, the entrepreneurial spirit takes over, and then they fill those gaps with the free market. I think that would be an excellent idea.
Okay. I guess just speaking even just generally as an entrepreneur, but even and specifically as a veteran entrepreneur, what would you say are some of the common blockages or impediments that are faced by entrepreneurs in Canada to success? And do you have some suggestions or recommendations on those areas?
I would say once the mindset's established that an individual is going to be an entrepreneur, that's probably step one. And I think the CAF does a great job of creating really headstrong individuals that can take on that challenge. But then I would say the second most important issue to tackle is capital. Access to capital is incredibly hard. I've struggled to raise capital to help myself grow, so I'm bootstrapped. I'm too small to really garner any serious attention, and the majority of the businesses that I talk with and that I engage with, we're all in the exact same position. So our market is small here in Canada. We know that. Breaking out into the general, plurality of Canadians where we want to sell to everybody and have a successful business is also tough as well. Finding mentorship is tough, but definitely capital is very hard to come by. And typically we have to rely on the bank or a BDC loan. And those aren't quite favorable and have no special programs just for veterans in and of itself.
Okay. And while you're here, I was just going to ask you if you had any other areas that you would have advice, like we're here to talk about entrepreneurship, but any other areas of advice for VAC that you think they could do better or different just from your own experiences or the experience of other veterans?
10 seconds.
I would say there has to be some sort of concept of a veteran becoming an entrepreneur within the back to work process, because it was awful for me, and I don't think veterans that decide to get into entrepreneurship should be penalized for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. I forgot to mention I am the clock keeper. Just as military, I am extremely focused on keeping everyone on time, so I apologize in advance, and thank you for your service, sir. On that, I will go with Mrs. Ertl for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. She's our drill sergeant most days. I'm sure you are. And thank you for being with us this morning. Lovely to have you, and good to hear your information. Talking about transitions, and you mentioned something in your opening statement about the culture and identity, going from following orders to having to pitch yourself. What skills, as you were transitioning into your own consulting business, what skills do you feel were transferable from your military service that you were able to bring with you into this business that you're running?
Great question. Stubbornness, inability to quit, a no-fail mission mentality. But in all seriousness, the resolve that a lot of us have, leaving the military, when you enter into entrepreneurship, it is another war, just in a different battlefield. The amount of failure that we experience, and if you know the CAF, like I know the CAF, you're always understaffed, undermanned, and you got to just figure it out and get her done. And this is the perfect transition for me. That was me from day one in the Canadian Armed Forces. So now I just get to solve complex problems, but those complex problems are ones I actually want to solve, and I get to move forward and help other veterans get healthier and fitter in the process. So I would say just a very strong capacity for resilience is probably the most important skill, and then just being able to have confidence in your ability to figure things out. That's all entrepreneurship is just figuring out problems day after day. So we're definitely well trained and well positioned to become good entrepreneurs. We just need the landscape to help us out and not be in our way so much.
Thank you. What about skills that perhaps you would have had that would like to have used, but were more challenging, or perhaps people weren't as open to it, or you struggled to communicate? Is that...
I chose to remain in the veteran sphere for my service-related company because that's what I knew. That's what I understood. Now, if you know veterans or if you know the market of veterans, it's probably the worst market to stay in because we're grumpy, we're cheap, we need convincing, we don't like giving up email addresses, we think the government's going to steal them from us. So it is not an easy go. Were I to do it all over again, I probably would have chosen a different market, but I'm in it now. I love it. And what skills, I think the question was, what skills did I wish I could have had? I wish I had a better capacity to reach out for help. And the term entrepreneurship is essentially working together. And that's where the lone wolf kind of operator took hold for a little bit too long. But now I've seen the light and I realize there's a lot more to entrepreneurship than just trying to work on it by yourself, and building that and asking for help and not being afraid to tell somebody, hey, I'm not doing so well here. Could you give me a hand? Is probably an important skill that at least I suffered from at the get-go.
Thank you. I think a lot of adults struggle with that, but I can appreciate that it's even more so for veterans. Absolutely. You mentioned that access to capital was a real challenge. How did you get started, and what? Yeah, I'm sure there's a story there.
Madam Chair, how long do we have? Yep.
Yeah, you got a couple minutes.
Well, funny story. I got started the complete wrong way in entrepreneurship. I wasn't being followed by VAC at the time, although I was released medically. I didn't realize I had pretty severe post-traumatic stress syndrome. I just decided that I couldn't carry on in my teaching career any longer because I was having panic attacks and I didn't know why, and I just said, I'm done. So I left and I found a job in tech. I subsequently got fired from that job because it was a terrible fit. And then I told my wife, I have this great idea. I'm going to start a company right now. She's like, that is not a good idea. But I'm glad I did, because now I'm here with you today. And I started just with the money I had in my bank account. That's it. I had no idea how to access capital, but I knew I could do something for relatively cheap online. So I started coaching people online and started making revenue that way. But now trying to grow the business, accessing more capital and accessing individuals, which could put you in the right rooms, that's where I'm starting to focus a lot of my efforts. So that's the nature pretty much of all the companies that I know and all the individuals that I know that started companies. They just started in their basement and figured, hey, I can make money doing this. And then we all bootstrapped our companies.
Yep, I hear that a lot. Networking. I'm just going to jump on that because you made a comment about getting into the right rooms, the right people. Are there networking organizations specifically for veterans? And if not, should there be? What can we do to better allow veterans access to individuals who can aid with those challenges?
There definitely are organizations out there. It's just whether or not they're a right fit and whether or not their mission aligns with what you're doing. We've created our own quasi networks that are unofficial that I find are more beneficial than the official networks out there, but there are very few. Again, we don't have, like in the United States, veteran service organizations that are actually understood and organized through the VA. So our organizations are a patchwork. We don't know which ones are doing well, and most are struggling, to be honest. Now, for my personal objectives, I don't want to necessarily just be in veteran networks. I want to be in everybody else's network and engage with the broader population.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Morrow. I will have some instruction. Madame Gaudreau will be talking to you in French. Are you fluently bilingual?
Oui, madame.
Parfait. Ben, c'est très bien.
Yes, I am. Well, that's great to hear. Because she will be talking to you for 6 minutes in French. Madame Gaudreau, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you for offering us all of the issues that veterans are confronting. And as an entrepreneur myself, I have a coaching business. There's often a gap between the understanding of what it takes to become an entrepreneur, but also our background. And at the time, I didn't meet a lot of veterans. And in the last year, I understand that human beings need to say, here's what people have lived through. Here are the issues. And how are they well prepared? And I say that because I work a lot in employability and in business development. And that's one thing that needs to be learned: access to credit, managing capital, confronting the adversity of developing a business. But am I correct in saying that whether you're employers or business people don't know enough about all of your skills? Is that correct? Is that the issue? So I'm very sensitive to the possibility of creating a transition center. Transition in the sense of sometimes we don't know that we're 80% ready for something to launch a business. Are you receiving enough accompaniment? So in terms of, so physical health is one thing, but then there's mental health in our daily lives and in the life of an entrepreneur or workers. Isn't there something there that we could improve upon enormously? If I've understood correctly, it's creating a type of boot camp or training program for veterans who are coming out of the Canadian Armed Forces to have training, formal training. It's a good question. I would say yes. There are organizations that are getting that off the ground. Here in Ottawa, there's an organization that works in partnership with the University of Ottawa. As I said earlier, there was also Operation Entrepreneur. I'm a graduate of that program. So yes, there is a weakness in education for veterans who want to become entrepreneurs. There's a solution in the United States. It's called Bunker Labs, and it's a type of accelerator. I think it's fantastic. One of the shortcomings for creating a type of program based on concepts designed in government is that it's not market-based. So what I saw with Operation Entrepreneur is that, yes, it was an excellent program, 1 week of training. I attended at the University of Regina for a week, and it was fantastic, except at the end, we all had the same question. Who should we talk to now for funding? What's the next step? And since it's a program that was designed by, I think it's a charity, and at the end, there was no support afterwards. But like in the United States, after a company finished its training, then they're able to submit an application for funding. But it's just for investors. If the investors aren't interested, well, it's not 100% proven in the market. So I think that that's excellent, but it doesn't exist yet here in Canada. But to answer your question, I think 100%, there needs to be a place that trains veterans, and not for a long time. A week of training is enough. That would be great for veterans. The follow-up for access to capital, should it be different than for a young business person who is just starting and they also don't know where to turn, and they don't know investors, and they don't have assets? Is there a difference, or is there work to be done there? Good question. I don't think so. we are I hate feeling special. I don't want a special handout. I want to be aligned with the system that exists, but currently there's no real. Well, I worked for the CAF transition group, and I was there to build training for people who were leaving the forces, and what are the steps, and what types of jobs are there. There's no training for entrepreneurship. So the concept doesn't even really exist, the idea of a veteran entrepreneur. So that's another issue, I think, is that entrepreneurship is just not normalized. And so I think we have a lot of work to do as a result. Thank you very much.
Va falloir me regarder. J'essaie de pas.
I'm trying to not cut you off, Mr. Morrow. And now we'll move to our second round. And I'd like to invite Mr. Tomey to take the floor for 5 minutes.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Morrow, for coming, for your service, and your testimony was very, very enlightening. There's a few areas that I'd like to go over. I'd like to go over entrepreneurship. I'd like to go over your views on other nations. I want to cover benefits, and then I want to go back to other nations. You mentioned about entrepreneurship, and that you started your business by your own bank account, and what do you think VAC could have done to help you more in you starting up?
Good question. To be honest, I don't know if I want much VAC support in the business side of things. I want them just to focus on, at that point, was just getting my claims done as quickly as possible, because that was my financial lifeline.
Okay.
If that's done, then the entrepreneur side of the house gets a lot easier.
And that's interesting, because is it because you don't want them part of your business because you think that they're going to be an obstacle, as opposed as they sit right now and as they operate right now?
Yeah, I do not want to have to go through any red tape for my company. I can tell you that much, and especially through VAC with the wait times. I don't want to deal with that. There are some. This wasn't done on purpose, because getting to the point where I have my deck, right, and we call ourselves deck daddies at home now. So the benefit is great. So I have that side of the house taken care of. But the lack of ability to make, let's say, employment income, especially early on, was I couldn't understand why that was the case. So I looked into it. We're one of the few nations that do it. The Americans don't do it at all. They say you get your disability, and if you want to, make $1 million a month, you can. That's fine. I would say that inadvertently created a lot of entrepreneurs, because we realized, well, we can create an incorporation, and then we're not getting employment income. So inadvertently, VAC has kind of created like the perfect entrepreneurship ecosystem, I think by accident. I always encourage as many veterans as possible to start their own companies. Would I want them to actually support it? No, I just want them to recognize that this is something I want to do, and don't treat me differently because I'm an entrepreneur and I don't want to follow the back to employment plan, which basically said I should be a CBC radio host, which made no sense.
Right. Okay, and I'm glad you're not. So I just need a little bit of clarity here. What you're saying is that you look at the U.S., and then they have an office within VA that helps them with starting up a business, but that has nothing to do with the benefits. Is that what you're?
No, what I'm saying is that there's a capacity for you to create a business that is recognized by the VA.
Right.
But they don't offer the actual coaching. because they recognize it's much better handled by the free market. So then everything that I've experienced in the United States has been free market, which is the best proving ground. So that's how you can create your company, you can get your business number, that's a veteran-owned business number, but they have that managed through the VA, and then you go out into the wild and do what you need to do to grow your empire.
So now I want to go to benefits, because my understanding is that when you were in your testimony, it seems like VAC dissuades you from starting up and from making money, and that they interfere, that if you do make money, that they're going to claw back your benefits. And you're saying to this committee that they should stay out of that. If you're entitled to benefits, you should be entitled to benefits, and then if you make money, then you should be able to make money. Is that correct? I mean,
Yeah.
they've done the service. They deserve the benefits that they are entitled to.
Well, it's a philosophical question. It's the way we've structured our benefits now. It's no longer like my grandfather's pension from war service. So it was based on your injury. You got your pension. You didn't have to deal with a case manager. That was that. And then my grandmother got it once she died. In our case, it's all based on your rank, which determines how much you make. It's determined on how injured you are. It's determined based on how nice you are with your case managers. There's a lot of avenues that can end up you getting your benefits cut, and the threats are the worst part, because when you get threatened that, oh, Mr. Morrow, we know you have a podcast and we know you're making money off of these things, and you're not declaring income, you know that that's essentially fraud. That throws me for a loop, because I'm not committing fraud. My business is making money. I'm not declaring income because I'm not making income. I'm not making employment income. That alone is troubling for a lot of us entrepreneurs, because we want to create good businesses, but we also don't want to be threatened by VAC because we're doing something that's outside of the mold.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moreau. Again, Madame Auguste will be speaking to you en français pour 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Mr. Moreau, thank you for your service. As you perhaps know, the government has taken a Buy Canada policy in procurement for the federal government to grow Canadian businesses across the country. There are some concerns that stem from that, including a requirement for prioritizing businesses held by veterans, that people might create shell companies or performative companies. We think that we want to maximize opportunities for veterans to participate in this type of program, and to give them the opportunity and to see how we can look at the relevant considerations. My question for you is this. As an entrepreneur and a veteran, how would you address these concerns in the advice that you give to those responsible for procurement? Answer. If I've understood the question properly, it's that as an entrepreneur, how would I position myself to make a request for procurement? Is that correct? For procurement? In my opinion, we're great at creating a business that is based on our strengths. Given that that's the case, as in my career in the armed forces, we would say we're in the black about how we make applications to organizations that exist here in Canada. For me personally, I have no idea how to bid on offers for the Government of Canada, but I would say that if we're able to get training on that, that would be great. I said that earlier. Just to be certain that, yes, it is a means that can be used to achieve growth in our business. And that's important, I think. Thank you very much. My next question deals with the fact that you said that some veterans didn't necessarily identify as such in their business activities, that it was poorly seen. And my question is, do you think there needs to be a change of culture in the private sector? And based on your expertise, how would we kick that off so that people can proudly say that they're veterans? Great question. I'm a Quebecer. I was born and raised in Montreal. All my friends are in the same boat. There are a lot of businesses that are veteran-led. And as I said, it's not something that gives us an edge, probably because Quebec isn't exactly the proudest. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's different in Alberta, for example, or elsewhere. But yes, the culture needs to change, and I think that the best way to change the culture is to take veteran entrepreneurs who are successful and give them a platform, to give a shot in the arm, to say, great job. This is a veteran who's doing a great job in their sector. It's a quick win. We don't often see that in the media. And I think that would be great for our veteran entrepreneurs, just to see themselves and other people who are successful in their respective sectors. And I think things will change slowly in that case.
Je vais vous remercier d'avoir répondu.
Thank you for answering my question. I'm almost out of time. Thanks. Thank you very much, Ms. Auguste. For 2.5 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. Okay. So we're just discussing amongst ourselves. It's not easy to start a business. And the best gift we can offer to someone who wants to start a business is to know which doors to knock on. Veterans included. Young people, less young people. It's often the key. The key that allows us to develop networks, and all of the networks right now that help business people are organizations that were not made by the public service, the chambers of commerce and business people. And I get the impression, and maybe it's a false impression, but not only do they prepare you to deal with life of the day-to-day at the end of service, that's one thing. Sometimes there may be post-traumatic reactions that the average Joe can't understand. And that has a major impact on. But on the other hand, you could say it's part of the process of starting a business, but it takes a network of contacts. And I'm under the impression that just that part could help you, unless there's negative impressions or you're feeling labeled. And then you could say, look, all my skills, look at my professional background, look what I've done, and that's highlighting your value, which is not always easy. So I'd just like you to say, am I getting warm here? Yeah? You have 20 seconds. I did 15 years with the armed forces. When I came out, I had no network because I hadn't worked in business. I had no contacts. So it was my podcast that built me that network. But if you don't have that, well, we're able to attack the enemy, but we need to have a direction. And if we don't have a direction, it's very difficult. Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow.
It's Mrs. Jensen.
I really appreciate you coming here to share with us your challenges. I just want to say that entrepreneurship is something that's not been particularly popular for the last 10 years or so. I come from an entrepreneurial background, and what I love about everything you said was, straight out, you guys have unique qualities. You have a huge risk tolerance. That's what you need as an entrepreneur. You think outside the box. And a lot of people don't like that. They're not comfortable with that. I think VAC probably falls in that genre. You never give up, and you want to fill a need. And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So just the fact that you come here is awesome, because I love to see, as you said, not just veterans, but all of Canadians seek to become an entrepreneur, to depend on themselves. So I was just wondering, you mentioned the fact that VAC doesn't even consider it when you're talking about, changing from. So tell me a little bit more about that process, because that kind of blows my mind. It doesn't, and it does.
There's VAC and then there's PCVRS. So if we include them as one big amorphous blob, from the get-go, it wasn't clear what the policies are and what I have access to. So I didn't realize that moving over to PCVRS meant I couldn't access my education training benefit. Okay, so that meant I had to go through their retraining process. But the funny thing was, I had left the forces and I had worked for over a decade with no follow-up because I just didn't want to talk to the military. I was done with them. I didn't open any letters. I didn't answer phone calls. Just get away from me. So that being said, when I did go back to get help, I was already well into a teaching career. I had worked a bunch of different jobs that just kept on falling apart, not realizing it was because of my service-related injuries. But that being said, they get in the way essentially because they just don't have any policy guidebook to go by, because that's all they do. They follow policy, but there's nothing there for anybody that decides to become an entrepreneur. So they're suspicious of it because they think we're trying to commit fraud. And that is 100% my experience and some of my friends' experience. I'm speaking anecdotally here, obviously. So to improve that, it would just be the culture here in Canada is not entrepreneurial. And I think that bleeds into our organizations that are mandated to take care of us, because they just don't. Like I said, I tried to get a chair because I have a bad back, and they said, well, that'd be great, but unfortunately, you don't have a job. And I said, but I do. I'm in a chair basically all day. I'm doing podcasts. I'm helping veterans. They go, well, you're self-employed. Sorry, we don't support that. So that means I'm being limited in my ability to get services because I decided to be an entrepreneur, and that to me just isn't fair.
So could you reiterate for me what it is that the States is doing that we should be doing? Because that sounded really exciting. You had some really great points.
Well, there's a lot, and we could do a whole hearing on it. But one of the main things that I've noticed is that the Americans, as we all know, are the masters of entrepreneurship. But what they do is they're willing to take risks, and their companies are willing to, and I'm talking about their major corporations, are willing to take risks and build networks because they realize this is the engine that keeps America going. We could have the exact same thing here. We have a much smaller population. But that being said, I'm sure our numbers are relatively the same. We need to get our numbers down. We need to know exactly how many are in entrepreneurship. We need to know how much revenue we're bringing in, and then what we can do to help. And what they've done is they set up these amazing events, and they have individuals that are willing to put up lots of funding based on a pitch, like Dragon's Den, and that is the support we need here. And I'm not talking loans. I'm talking literal investment. And capital investment in our companies would help us grow this community significantly better and not have to always look to the United States to help grow our companies, because that's unfortunately what I have to do and a lot of our companies have to do now to find a market that will actually help us grow.
Wonderful. I just met Brett Wilson from the Dragon's Den this weekend, so we'll have to put a little bug in his ear about that idea. But can you tell me, so when you go to reintegrate, does it even mention the word entrepreneur?
Never. No, it's not. So to give you an idea of what I had to physically do as part of my rehabilitation, even though I'd had 6 or 7 jobs during the time where I wasn't being followed by VAC, They had me go carry heavy buckets and put pegs into pegboards and then write a Excel file. Based on everything I've told them, all my experience, you still have to go through this process. And I said, I already have gainful employment, but that doesn't have a NAT code, so therefore, NIAT code. So therefore, I didn't fall into anything. So they just basically assumed I wasn't doing anything to help my process along, and that was unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. I appreciate. Mr. Casey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Mr. Morrow. Thank you for your service and for your testimony. It's absolutely fascinating. Before putting my name on the ballot, I spent some time running a family business and also chaired an angel financing network in Atlantic Canada. So to hear the stories of your challenges, it hits fairly close to home. But I want to start with the Veterans Family and Wellbeing Fund. Is that a fund that you've been able to avail yourself of in your business?
Yeah, I'm very thankful for that fund helping get the ACVA program up off the ground. It's a online program for female veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces. It's helped over 200 women get healthier and fitter since 2022. And being a for-profit company is actually quite rare for a for-profit company to get funding. That is something that I think could help, especially in the entrepreneur space, to help out companies that are for-profit that are actually putting out good programs that could potentially help the veteran community. But since then, the Veteran Wellbeing Program, I've heard nothing from it, and I don't know when the next application date is. It seems very opaque, unfortunately, so I don't know if I'll ever get funding from them again. So I've resorted to having it as a B2B type or a B2C type model where individuals pay to get on the program.
So since you got the support through the program, you're not aware of any other opportunities to avail yourself of it?
There are in Quebec. We have the Quebec Veteran Foundation.
Okay.
So they've helped with funding. I've also reached out to my American friends as well to see if they'd be interested in building this into like an international program. I'm using my entrepreneur skills to try and build this out, but the Veteran Wellbeing Fund hasn't funded this program specifically for over a year. But there's a lot of potential there for programs like that to branch out. And I'd just say one thing about the fund, appreciative of the fund, but one thing that I would like to see from it is greater accountability to know which programs that are getting funding actually are effective. If I'm doing my numbers and I'm making sure that my program is running well and it's getting results, I want to make sure the other ones are doing that as well so that we actually can rank and determine which programs are actually helping veterans get the help that they need and become better.
At the very start of your presentation, you indicated that you have organized an international Veterans Entrepreneur Conference. Can you talk a little more about that?
Absolutely. To be clear, I didn't organize the conference, but the conference is called Military Influencer Conference. It happens every year in the United States. What I did was bring Team Canada down to Atlanta 2 years ago. Having built a really good relationship with the organizers in the United States, they said this would be a great time to highlight a bunch of Canadian businesses. We've never done this before. We want to kind of branch out into Canada and the UK and build this brand. So I brought down 6 Canadian companies, including my own. We had Dallas Alexander play his own special little set. So we did a very big kind of splash, and it landed really well with the Americans and landed really well with the Canadian entrepreneurs. I'd never seen anything like this because for the 4 days that you're there, you feel like a rock star. You get all the exposure, you have your booth, there's tons of people asking you what you're doing in terms of your business and how we can partner and how we can collaborate, and then there's a beautiful gala dinner, there's all kinds of stars, Jon Stewart, you name it, and then they recognize all the support members of the veteran community. So like mill spouses, individuals that go out of their way to make sure the veteran community is strong and progressing. So I saw that as an opportunity to just show other Canadians that this is possible, we can do this, and we can do this not necessarily on this big a scale, but definitely we can bring something like that back home here to Canada.
Okay, I've got less than a minute. Operation Entrepreneur and the affiliation with the University of Regina. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
The University of Regina program with Operation Entrepreneur was great for me. It helped me get my head straight as to what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, now it's defunct as far as I can tell. I think people are trying to save it. But from what I could tell, if I could just reiterate one point, the model didn't make sense. And the reason why is because you have a charity that isn't bound to market forces trying to help entrepreneurs that are bound to market forces. So the charity, it doesn't matter if they produce a bunch of really good companies because they still get their funding regardless. So if you have an organization like an accelerator that is tied to the market, you could end up creating a whole bunch of really good companies that will then move out into the free market and be successful. So that was just my main contention for that program. Great program, learned a lot, but it had its flaws because it wasn't tied to the market dynamics.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Moreau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moreau. We really appreciate that you came to join us today.
The great work that you do. And again, thank you for your service, sir. On this, I will suspend so we can welcome our next two witnesses. Merci. nous allons débuter.
We'll start our second hour of committee. Just to clarify, we are having technical issues with one of our witnesses for the second hour. So it is possible that I will ask leave to test his sound, but we have here with us Mr. Basil Ryan,
From the Atlantic Association of Community Business Development Corporation. Mr. Ryan, as I was explaining, we're having a technical problem with another witness, so there may be an opportunity that I may either suspend. We'll see. But we wanted to start because we wanted to welcome you. So the way we will be proceeding is you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then I will open the floor for our parliamentarian and our member of our committee to ask questions. So, sur ce, Monsieur Ryan, je voulais...
With that, Mr. Ryan, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the invitation to appear before your committee. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Atlantic Association of Community Business Development Corporations. We're a network of 41 nonprofit corporations that are governed by volunteers from our local communities. Our work is primarily in community business development with an emphasis on access to capital and business support. We form part of a larger network of 267 community futures corporations from coast to coast to coast. With reference to the specific question on barriers to entrepreneurship, I'd suggest my response is more anecdotal than based on any empirical evidence. In my office, I recently had a veteran on staff. My chief financial officer has a son that is recently retired member, and his wife is also recently retired from the military. And lastly, my son-in-law is stationed currently in Edmonton, Alberta, and getting close to retirement, so the subject matter is relevant to me. I'd like to break my comments into two sections. First, to the barriers, and second, to possible solutions for consideration by the committee. I recognize that some of your previous witnesses have already provided you with commentary on the matter, and some of my testimony is repetitive to what's already been heard. Ex-military entrepreneurs face a combination of financial, psychological, structural, and network-based barriers. And I've noted 6 of them. 1, challenges in a military to civilian transition. Military is regimented, as you know. Entrepreneurship can be anything but regimented. Transitioning from one to the other can be very challenging. 2, access to capital and credit barriers. Individuals leaving the military would have a reduced income stream, and they may also lack specific collateral to post as security. Depending on their individual deployments, maybe it's in the Navy or out of country, et cetera, they may not have strong credit history. 3, translating military skills into business competencies. Individuals may have excellent skill sets within the military environment that are applicable to entrepreneurship, but individuals may also have a difficult time translating them into an entrepreneurial culture. Veterans may face gaps in business acumen, like marketing, financial literacy, and strategic planning. 4th, there's limited social and professional networks outside of the military. Depending again on their individual deployments and or assignments, their social and professional network may not include access to mentors or small business networks. 5 is psychological health and stress-related barriers. Stress, identity shifts, and mental health impacts of service can create additional hurdles. Entrepreneurship's inherent uncertainty can intensify stress for those accustomed to a clear mission structure, affecting decision-making and resilience. And lastly, navigating fragmented support systems. Not unlike individuals outside the military seeking entrepreneurship, ex-military may struggle with understanding who can help and how to find that help. So, in terms of possible solutions, we've been quite successful in targeting other marginalized groups with access to financing and business management skills development. In Atlantic Canada, we encourage our member corporations to be open to all individuals that want to pursue entrepreneurship. In 2003, we recognized that women face different barriers than men in starting businesses. So we introduced a risk mitigation fund to encourage our corporations to be more open to lending to women business owners, a loan guarantee, if you will. We also targeted young entrepreneurs and first-time entrepreneurs in the same fashion. The results were substantial increases in the volumes of business transacted with these targeted groups. We were able to leverage capital on an exponential basis. We dedicated a risk mitigation fund of $8 million that has leveraged over $197 million to these targeted groups. We recently replicated this program to target other marginalized groups under equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. There is no reason, other than having access to financial resources, that we cannot do the same for veterans. In contrast, we offered some direct lending support to technology-based companies back in 2004. That direct lending program had $5.7 million for capital. It lent $10 million. The leverageability of that was far less than doing it via a risk mitigation fund. We augmented the risk mitigation fund by offering business management skills training at a nominal cost to entrepreneurs, because we believe that the better trained entrepreneurs are, the better chances of success. The work that we do with Community Futures, based on analysis that have been done by Stats Canada, suggests that firms assisted by Community Futures have a higher 5-year survival rate, they employ more people, and have higher sales. So that's my opening statement, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. And we are joined with Mr. Nicholas Strosser. I would just like to make sure that the sound tests have been done. So, member, give me 1 minute. I'm going to suspend just to verify that everything is okay. Unfortunately, due to still technical problem, we were unable to welcome Mr. Strausser. We're going to do our very best to welcome him again before we end our study. On this note, this opens the floor for question, Mr. Ryan. So we will be starting with 6 minutes of questions, and Mrs. Wagenthal will start.
Chair, I'm putting my timer to 6 minutes. Okay. Mr. Ryan, thank you so much for being here and for all that you provided to us in that short 5 minutes. It gives me a sense that you have a good understanding of some of the challenges that our veterans face, specifically in this field, and I deeply appreciate Community Futures and the work that they do, especially rurally. I'm from Saskatchewan as well, and they do great work. So I have a question that I hope you can assist me with from the previous witness that we had here, Mr. Morrow. He's a veteran, and he commented on the fact that when he transitioned out of the service, it took him between 10 and 15 years to get to the point where he was ready to be an entrepreneur. He has the gifts and the talents, there's no question, but in that transition time, I know that for those of us on this committee and for Veterans Affairs, there isn't a lot of focus on entrepreneurial spirit and moving forward in that area for veterans, and yet we need to have it. But at the same time, the reality is our veterans do take a while, the majority of them, to transition to where they're ready for that type of thing. Do you find that yourself in those that you maybe have had the opportunity to interact with, or in conversation with your son-in-law, whatnot, to sense when they would be ready to do that, if they do have that spirit?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. There seems to me that there's always a bit of a lag in terms of when somebody's transitioning from the military to civilian life, in terms of trying to decide what they want to do in terms of, so my chief financial officer, both her son and daughter-in-law have left the military now for about 1.5 years. They're still trying to kind of find their way of what they're going to do, whether it's going to be for gainful employment or to pursue a career in entrepreneurship. And some of that is just in the transitioning to civilian life and moving kind of back home, setting up a dwelling and so on, and then trying to sort out what really are my options that might be available to you, to that individual. So depending on where they locate, is there a market for perhaps some of the entrepreneurs' ventures that they want to participate in? So generally speaking, there is a lag from the time the person leaves the military until they actually get to a place where they're ready to open a business of their own.
Thank you very much. So in stating that, would you have any recommendations to Veterans Affairs Canada and National Defence working together? I've been on this committee for a decade now. We're still trying to figure out that transition model, it seems, yeah. And what could be done to enable someone that has that potential but cannot function in that area just now. Are there steps that could be taken to assist to get them there?
Yeah, I think it's generally in society, we don't tend to talk about entrepreneurship as a career choice, in terms of you kind of fall into it, or just kind of happen into it, or you have that entrepreneurial spirit, where our education system is not well at providing students with options and choices around entrepreneurship. There's no different than the military, that it could be part of the offboarding, if you will, or the exit strategy, is to provide that as a career option. Here, did you ever think about entrepreneurship as opposed to going into the trades, working for somebody else, or doing some other type of work? But I think it's part of that is creating the awareness that is a viable option for some people to go into entrepreneurship.
I can appreciate that, and I think a lot of our serving members can, because your role in the military is to do what you're told. not to think for yourself in, I don't, that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean. So,
Absolutely.
So, as they're going through their military service, we've talked about the fact that they should always have that understanding that at some point life is going to change. Do you see that as contradictory to what the military needs them to do and think about versus what maybe perhaps they have that potential in the future?
No, I wouldn't say it's contradictory, but I think there needs to be the awareness needs to be created in terms of we know that when a person enters the military, they're gonna exit at some point, and there's exit strategies that are generally developed, and I'm not sure that Veteran Affairs is doing a good a job as they could be doing in terms of providing those options around entrepreneurship for individuals that are exiting the military.
Provide those opportunities to learn about the potential, not to do it themselves.
I missed the very first part of your.
Well, the intention there would be for Veterans Affairs not to do that themselves, but to find individuals such as yourself and others who could come and communicate on those issues.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, there are resources out there in terms of, so it may be targeting groups like Community Futures to provide that type of facilitation to folks that are leaving the military.
Well, that's great because, as you know, we need to clean things up and get rid of red tape as much as create more bureaucracy. So I think that would be very helpful.
Correct.
Thank you. 4 seconds, Madam Chair.
I would say today you get the gold star, Ms. Wagenthal. J'aimerais donner la parole maintenant.
I'd like to give the floor now to Mr. d'Entremont. And welcome to our committee, Mr. d'Entremont. You will have 6 minutes to start. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
For joining us today. And I think the experience from Nova Scotia is probably really important. We do have a high participation rate in the Canadian Armed Forces that come from Nova Scotia. We have a number of large assets in the Canadian Armed Forces, of course, in Halifax and, of course, in my riding of Acadianapolis and Greenwood, the largest Air Force base as well. And what we tend to see is a lot of folks that come to Nova Scotia tend to want to retire in Nova Scotia. So we do have a lot of transition folks that are finding their next step in their careers in Nova Scotia. So having the CBDCs here, I think, is extremely important, and to sort of talk about what we're actually doing on the ground. My first question really revolves around how many clients does CBDCs have right now that would be identified as veterans, or do you actually take that data in? Is that data that you actually keep?
No, we don't per se in terms of it's normally self-identification that we don't have the matrix within the statistics right now in terms of, but we can start looking at that again to help out veterans. Is maybe we should be looking at those attributes within, so we have a better database on the number of people that are exiting the military and have entered entrepreneurs.
Because if we go to the previous presenter, Mr. Morrow, if we talk about 8,000 retirees per year, there's a number of those that would be, of course, in Nova Scotia. There's a number of those that would be looking for their transition, but we don't actually, take that data. So, I don't think VAC is really taking in that data. I don't think the armed forces, they have an idea, I'm sure, of their retirements, but in that transition, I don't think we're doing a great job in trying to figure that part out. Well, and maybe that leads me to the second question, but I know we don't have a data on veterans, but, if we look at the areas in which CBDCs actually reside, so if we look at the Valley, for example, would we be seeing more folks accessing the programs from CBDC in that area? We might not know exactly if they're veterans or not, but at least we know that there's more folks in that area than there would be in other parts of the province.
Yeah, again, I can't give you numbers, but I can say anecdotally that particular office in Hants Kings that services Greenwood, for example, they do have a number of clients that are ex-military. I can't give you the exact number, but I know they do have clients. They have somewhere around 400 clients on their database currently, and a number of those are ex-military people.
The other, as we look at who is retiring as well, I think we have younger and younger veterans as time goes on. A lot of women veterans. Do you see an adapting some of the programs that CBDCs or Community Futures would have in order to help them in their transition?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we target a number of groups now in terms of whether it's youth entrepreneurship, first-time entrepreneurs, those that are doing innovative type things, as well as Black entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, and so on. I don't think it'd be too far of a stretch to say that we should be targeting veterans that are retiring in terms of as another one of those groups that we can help out. In terms of if there's that many, I wasn't aware there's 8,000 members that are retiring per year. So that provides a market for us to look at and say, okay, if there's 8,000 veterans that are maybe we can help them as they transition.
In your opening presentation, I mean, you talked about the 6 issues that you saw. Transition. Well, that's not in your hands. It's in the Canadian Armed Forces hands. And some of the other ones are, of course, in their hands as well. But access to capital is well within your scope. Where should we be looking or supporting you in your process to access that capital? I know you have your own funds that you deal with, but right. When we were talking to Mr. Morrow, it's also the issue of is it loans, is it grants? There's a whole thing that we can get into a rabbit hole here, but what kind of support and capital or credit that we could actually help veterans as they try to transition into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's a combination of a number of factors. The access to capital in terms of we don't do grants, we don't do contributions to any type of entrepreneurs anymore. We do provide loans. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we're not structured based on or have the rigidity of having a specific beacon score in terms of from a client that has to have a 700 beacon score. It could be less than 600. We pride ourselves on being patient lenders. We need to advertise that a bit more, that we tend to be more patient. We tend to be more developmental in nature and see ourselves as being alternative lenders. And I think that's one of the things that kind of separates us from other mainstream financial institutions. The other side of that is helping them gain the business management skills that they need in terms of, it's great that people have the ability to do welding and so on, but they understand how to do books. They understand how to deal with HR issues and those type of things. Even so far as, maybe there's some help on consultant advisory in terms of where they might want to go to ferret out an idea. And generally, that is something that we ask the clients to participate to a small amount. Generally, that's a grant that's provided to them, but there needs to be some skin in the game from the entrepreneur as well. So those two pieces.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. Sorry, I forgot to mention I am the clock keeper. So we do have Madame Gaudreau. So just to be, she will be addressing you in français, in French. So make sure that you have the right setting on your computer. Madame Gaudreau pour 6 minutes.
Madame Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for joining us, sir. Oh, I can see you. It's always difficult to look at each other. I've made an observation. When I talk about back home in Laurentides-la-Belle and in Quebec, but what I've been hearing today, I don't know, people are saying, I don't know what door to knock on, I have a hard time accessing capital. And that's exactly the same reality that anyone encounters when they start a business. So we need to go a bit farther on preparation, on skills prep, of the desire to be an entrepreneur. And you said, and I appreciated it, being an entrepreneur doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice, and I'm an entrepreneur as well. But how do you succeed in seeking out all of the tools that exist? Well, I must say that I'm very proud because in my riding, after years of working on employability, the organizations, the chambers of Congress, employability organizations, all of those organizations supporting entrepreneurs at the provincial level, CLDs. And as you know, they put all of these groups under one roof, and it's called the Office of the Entrepreneur. And so for people who say, oh, I have 15 doors to knock on, I need to seek out this guaranteed capital, it's all under one roof. So here's my question. If that model existed all across Canada, you would probably say that that's a good idea, right? What's missing in the equation to allow the veterans you met with to encourage them to define themselves as entrepreneurs and knock on the right doors?
Thank you very much for the question. It's difficult in terms of we've been trying for years in terms of to try to get that one-stop shopping in terms of to go to one single door to help entrepreneurs. And it doesn't matter whether you're an entrepreneur that's coming from the military or you're just coming out of high school or you're coming to the university. It's been a challenge. And we tend to do it in fits and starts. We'll do it for a while, and then if it doesn't measure some productivity scale, the funding gets cut, or it gets reduced to a point where it really is not working very well. There needs to be the sustained support for that one-stop shopping arrangement, so that people can avail of it. But that doesn't always work either, because Canada is a large country. When you look coast to coast to coast, and look in rural communities, it's very difficult to set up. You may set up a one-stop shop, but that might be 2 hours away in terms of being able to go in person. So there has been attempts made over the years to try to get one-stop shopping, trying to go online, but that can be a mirage for some people to go online to try to find out, where do I go? So sometimes it's just kind of a hit and miss kind of things. We try within our organizations to try to partner with other organizations and try to be part of the job that we do is not just providing access to capital and business management skills, it's also pointing people in the right direction. So again, it's trying to find a way to organize that better than what we have. We have to keep trying. That we have tried, and we haven't always been as successful as we like, but that should not stop us from continuing down that road.
Dernière question, en fait, c'est avec...
So my question is, with all of the knowledge and expertise that you've developed, is there a difference when you contact someone who wants to develop a business? Is there a difference between an individual who just finished university studies, someone who's changing careers, or a veteran who just finished their service? Is there a difference in their readiness to start a business?
I don't think there's a marked difference between those different parties that you talked about. I think the same type of struggles happen from whether it's a young person's trying to start a business or an older person that may have lost their job or somebody coming from the military. I think the same struggles exist. It's a lot of times with the successful entrepreneurs, the one that has the most amount of passion in terms of being able to not give up. I listened to Mr. Morrow in his presentation, a few minutes of it at least, and he talked about the fact that they never give up in terms of, and they stick to it in this. They do have a higher risk tolerance than others. So I think those attributes coming from the military give them a better leg up than perhaps a young person starting out.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madame Gaudreau. So we will wrap up with a second round. We will have 5 minutes for the Conservatives and the Liberals, and Madame Gaudreau, you'll wrap up with 2.5 minutes. So I'll open the last round of questions to Mr. Richards.
Thanks. Do you have experience with advising or working with businesses that are looking for government contracts or procurement at all?
I wouldn't say it's not our specialty, but I can certainly say that we've had interactions with people that are interested in government procurement and the processes and so on. So generally, part of our work is to try to help understand it ourselves and then try to translate that to the individuals looking for help.
Okay. Well, let me ask you the question. You tell me if you don't think you're qualified to answer it. That's okay. But if you think
Sure.
you can, I had asked Mr. Morrow a little bit about this in terms of government competing for government contracts. I guess I'm wondering, for small veteran-owned businesses, small businesses. Do you think there's a place and an ability for small veteran-owned businesses to be able to compete for government contracts, or do you think that that the scale is too great for like a smaller veteran business to be able to do that? I'm thinking about things like obviously areas where veterans would have expertise already, resupplying bases. Some of the procurement projects, consulting with with relation to the military, things like that. What would your thoughts be around that? Would there be a place there, you think?
Absolutely. I think there's a prominent place for them. In particular, when I getting ready for this presentation and start thinking about things a bit more, and the government of Canada has talked about 5% of GDP going towards defense. Who better suited to work in that field than ex-military in terms of that understand how the process works within the Defense Department and so on. There's lots of little niches within the military that an entrepreneur can make their way in. They may be a small one-person operation, or it might be with a lot of people. So absolutely, I think there's opportunities there that I think there can be some targeted set, no different than Indigenous entrepreneurs. That there's a target that sets something like 3% of government procurement going to Indigenous. Why not look at something like that for the ex-military people?
Okay, no, I think that's a great suggestion. And what would you say there'd be barriers there that would need to be knocked down? Is there any advice you'd give to either Veterans Affairs or the government more generally on how to make that more possible?
Yeah, I think in terms of some of the things that we do, like a risk mitigation fund, guaranteeing a loan for an individual that is, whether it's through the Small Business Loan Act, which is now the Canada Small Business Financing Act, or something that we do locally through the Community Futures Groups or the CBCs in Atlantic Canada. So that type of thing would help the entrepreneur.
Let me switch to another topic I wanted to ask you about, and whether you'd have any advice for the government or for Veterans Affairs in this regard as well. One of the things that I think veterans, often find when they leave the military and they move into civilian life that they're lacking in some regards is something they had in the military, which is that camaraderie, that sense of a team, helping each other. And obviously, when you go into entrepreneurship, sometimes that's not necessarily an obvious part of it, but that ability to have peer support or networks of peer support amongst veterans, is that something that perhaps VAC could set up or work with others to try and set up? I think about someone like a Dave Morrow who was just here. I bet you he'd be a great network for fellow veterans looking to start a business. What's your thoughts around that, and is that something that maybe the government could be
Sure.
working towards?
Yeah, I can speak to it from personal experience, actually, in terms of before my work with the CBCs, I was an entrepreneur. I had my own business for 17 years. One of the best things that I found early on was, at that time, it was through FBDB, which is today the Business Development Bank of Canada. they had a case counseling program, and part of that was under kind of like business management skills, where if you were an entrepreneur, you could join into a group of other entrepreneurs. And we got together on a weekly or bi-weekly basis over a full year. And we talked about subjects that are relevant to all of us: legal, taxation, HR, marketing, and so on. That was an absolutely wonderful program in terms of that. I still lean on some of those folks today from many years ago. So I think it's something that can be reinstituted through either BDC or even through Community Futures in terms of doing those type of networking sessions to help provide more of that mentorship and guidance, if you will, to those who want to pursue entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. I would like now to, for 5 minutes, Mrs. Hurdle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Basil.
Hi there.
Hi, thanks for being with us today.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. My colleagues, I spent the last 10 years working for a CBDC, so I'm quite familiar with Mr. Ryan. So you mentioned a little bit ago the one-stop shop component of CBDC or Community Futures. Can you expand on that a bit? I know there are financing, there's training, coaching, and I think you mentioned the consultant advisory services, and then there's also the entrepreneurial training fund. Can you give us a bit more information on those?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is providing that support to entrepreneurs. So we do have access to financing. We act as delivery agents for the self-employment benefit program, where somebody is on EI, then they want to start a business. They can keep their EI going over for upwards to a year. We provide help on entrepreneurial training around business management skills. We provide help under the consultant advisory, where some of it may be as simple as trying to flesh out a business plan that somebody's doing, or do diagnostic of maybe somebody's already in business and they're struggling, and try to understand why is it that I'm not generating the revenue that I would hope to. You can bring in consultants to help with that. So there's a whole array of things that go on. Some of our corporations in Newfoundland and Labrador have a youth entrepreneurship program that they start in the high school in terms of with young people on developing businesses, sometimes just for the summer, sometimes they're year-round. Then we have other, in Prince Edward Island, we have the I Want to Be a Millionaire program that targets young people. So there's a whole slew and variety of different programs that are available. And really, sometimes it just depends on the creativity within the particular office, how broad that is. If I look up in northern New Brunswick at Corporation CBC Restigouche, they have a lot of things where they're supporting not just the small business community, but the broader community around other community development type work.
Thank you. You've been at this for a while, about 30 years. In that time, the veterans that the different offices have dealt with, would you say that there are different challenges for them getting into entrepreneurship than anybody else off the street?
Yeah, I think if there's any place that I see a bit of a difference is, and this is kind of rearing its head more in society generally, is on mental health in terms of the transition, and depending on where they've been deployed. Perhaps if they're on base for their entire career, they may not have the same kind of issues that somebody that's been deployed in active duty, in overseas and so on. But generally speaking, they have a lot of the same challenges as Joe Q Public does in terms of starting a business. There is that. I think I've mentioned them in my presentation about the lack of professional networks outside of the military, and the fact that they've been used to doing something for the last 20 to 25 years, and all of a sudden they're changing from that regimented environment to one that's completely unregimented. That's going to be a little bit of more of a challenge than it would be for somebody else.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. Just to switch gears a tiny bit, as you have mentioned, the CBDCs specifically are all run by boards of volunteers. So, wondering how you ensure that there are different skill sets, different professional backgrounds on those boards, and then is there any specific intention or activity to bring on folks with a veteran's perspective?
It's difficult to say, Elena, in terms of with the 41 corporations. They're all independent. We do have a governance structure for all 41 of them, and that is to be, forward-facing, public-facing, drawn from your community. Try to have a diversification of folks that are sitting around the table. Do we target folks with military background? No, but I remember my chair that was in Guysborough for many years was Colonel Bill McDonald, who was a retired military man. I learned a lot from Bill in terms of that he was very regimented. Meetings were on time. You stuck to the agenda. And he always brought that military perspective. We have other folks that are retired from the military that are on our boards, more by happenstance than by design. But it may be something that we should be looking at in terms of, did you ever consider thinking about broadening the scope of people on the representation on your boards?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. And now this will be completing with 2.5 minutes by Mrs. Gaudreau, and she'll address you en français and French.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, what I've noted, and this is to our analyst as well, there is a call for a take note of what exists already, because I think there are things in Quebec and also elsewhere, and there needs to be a toolkit where people who are entering into contact with the veteran at the end of their service, they need a toolkit to say, here's what exists, because each environment has its way of doing things. But I think from the outset, when we talk about entrepreneurs, we really need to ensure that the individual has everything he or she needs, given the constraints that come with the role of an entrepreneur. Not everyone wants to put in hundreds of hours a week to start a business, and sometimes we think, well, I'm my own boss, things will go well. It won't be complicated. It's just like being an MP. We don't think it's 80 hours a week or more sometimes, but then when we realize it's different when we're living it. In the report, it would be really relevant, and I'd like to hear you on this, to say there are already many resources available. We need to ensure that people can have access to them, and at the same time, when we knock on doors, often we establish a network of people who have the same vision, and am I correct? Or on the contrary, when it comes to entrepreneurs, is everybody in the same boat with the drive to succeed? If I'm wrong, I'd like to hear from you on that, and you have 30 seconds.
Yep, I think the approach is still fragmented in terms of there are a lot of resources that are available to entrepreneurs of any stripe. The challenge is how do you keep everybody heading west, as they say. And I think one of the things for Veteran Affairs to consider is part of that extra strategy. You know that there's 8,000 members that are retiring per year. That part of that toolkit that should be developed is there's an option here around entrepreneurship. And here's some doors that you can knock on to see where you might be able to go, whether it's access to capital, whether it's just mentorship or guidance, and so on. But I think that can be a part of the work that's being done by Veteran Affairs, is to make a dedicated approach and to say there should be a toolkit here that includes entrepreneurship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. This will be concluding this part of our meeting. I will be keeping the last 10 minutes for some housekeeping. So on this note, Mr. Ryan, again, thank you very much for coming today. Thanks to your extended family for their contribution to Canada, and thank you for everything you do for the Atlantic individuals in Nova Scotia, I believe.
Actually, it's Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, Labrador, and New Brunswick. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So the entire Atlantic coast. So we're very happy to hear that. Thank you. Have a nice day, sir.
You too. Bye-bye.
OK, écoutez, moi, je veux juste...
Okay, listen. For the last few minutes, I'd like to take a few moments with you. I know that some of you have questions about the next steps and what we're doing, so I'd like to just follow up on that. Later this month, on February 11th, to be specific, the committee will start a new study in parallel with our study on obstacles to veterans entrepreneurship, concerning a study on contracts for rehabilitation services given to PCVRS. So we'll start that study on February 11th in parallel. A draft of the budget for this study was distributed to the committee on January 30th, and I need a mover for the budget. Is it your pleasure to adopt the budget, committee members? Great. Okay, so we have our answer. Mr. Clerk? Oh, yes.
What about the witness list? What do we have a deadline for when we need that, or?
Yes, so basically the study, as it was written, had very specific group of individuals that we had agreed to have come forward. So the clerk has been very hard at work on the 11th of February. I can confirm that we will be having the LifeMark coming to meet with us. So we have 4 confirmed witnesses for 2 hours on the 11th of February.
On that? It was my understanding, and Madame Goudreau could correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood the motion was that those were witnesses that she wanted to include amongst the witnesses. I didn't know that was the entirety of the witnesses. Is that, did I misunderstand that? That's why I'm asking about it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. We can certainly have other witnesses if that's the will of the committee. At this point, based on the current motion, we do have a minimum of 3, and we wanted to make sure that for the confirmation to establish on the motion that at least Madame Gaudreau, and at the will of this committee, we have everyone who will be able to appear within that segment of our committee time.
No, I do have other witnesses that would be interested, so should I submit those?
If this is correct, and with all of you, February 6th, you can send some names for future witnesses. Donc, je vais dire dans les 2 langues, juste le 6 février.
So we'll see it in both languages.
Tout le monde est d'accord?
Does everyone agree? February 6th is the deadline for adding other witnesses who would be part of the study.
I will continue because I do have a little bit of an update also. So last week, the committee received a request from the Lithuanian Embassy. On Monday, February 9, Madame, and I apologize, I want to make sure I say her name properly, Yekaterina Yorohaka, the chair of the Canada-Lithuania Friendship Group, is here in Ottawa. And from the Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania will be visiting us. And therefore, she requested a meeting with the Veterans Affairs Committee as it was circulated. And it was circulated last week, I believe, in both official language. So I would like to propose that the committee hold a private in-camera briefing with Mrs. Rodroka during our regular meeting on Monday, February 9th. So we would have the first hour for the entrepreneurship, and then we would go in camera for the second hour at the request of the Lithuanian Embassy to meet, and the chair reached out to all of us. So I thought it would be very relevant to know and hear about. So does the committee agree to all this briefing? Parfait. Okay.
Great.
On this, greffier a préparé un
The
budget.
clerk has drafted a budget for that information session. It was distributed to members once again on January 30th, 2026. Is the will of the committee to adopt the budget? Great.
For the month of February, so all of you will know. And I will just go through. Attends une minute. Je peux-tu apporter ça? Excuse-moi. This Wednesday, I want to make sure that my interpretation, we will continue on the barriers for entrepreneurship among veterans. We do have already confirmed witnesses joining us. As I mentioned, on February 9, we will have our first hour on barrier for entrepreneurship among our veterans community, and our second hour will be the briefing with the chair of the Canada-Lithuania Friendship Group at the Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania, and that will be an in-camera meeting. And then on the 11th of February, we will start our LifeMark group will be joining us for the full 2 hours, and we will allow them about, a little longer than the first 5 minutes, and then we'll open our 2-hour session for our 4 witnesses. Then we will go back to our writing. But what's very relevant for all of us is that on the 19th of February, il y aura distribution.
The report on suicide prevention will be distributed.
On the 19th of February. Once we come back from our constit and the great work we do in our writing, we will continue on the 23rd for the LifeMark. We are still working on witnesses for that day, but we will try very hard to secure individuals who will be able to come and join us. And then on the 25th of February, the barrier for entrepreneurship among veterans, we will continue our study on that. So that will bring us to the next first week of March, which will be the break. And when we come back from the break and our great work in our constituency, we will be starting our in-camera on the report writing for the consideration of the draft report for the suicide prevention among veterans, which I'm sure we all want to have completed for this session so we can table that report. So on that note, oh, yes, Mr. Richard?
I had one other question. You actually really did it. You almost got them all. And to be fair, this may be a question that you won't be able to answer, and perhaps Mr. Casey will be able to shed some light on. I think it was one of our last meetings before the break, but not the last meeting. We did have a motion that asked for an apology about that monument that has the incorrect information. I've never seen that apology. It's been 2 months since the motion. I'm wondering if you've heard anything, or if Mr. Casey can shed any light on what's occurred. If it's obviously been 2 months. We would have expected, likely would have occurred by now. Can anyone provide us an update on what's happening with that? Okay. Well then, Chair, I'd like to just put on notice of a motion, and it's short, but I'll read it into the record. Put it on notice that this committee express its disappointment in the government's failure to offer an apology to veterans affected by the presence and absence monument scandal, as called for in the motion of this committee on November 25th of 2025, and by the Ontario Legislature on October 29th, 2025, and that this be reported to the House. So I'm just putting that on notice, and do plan to move it at some point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Appreciate. On this note, le comité souhaite-t-il adjourner la réunion?
Would the committee like to adjourn the meeting?